Obviously, Sheikh was talking, and his whole research is based on the one point: Sahaba, they were humans, not superhumans, not infallibles, right? And that was the point, because uh, last time in the previous session, when the same topic was presented by the Sunni scholar Sheikh Abdul Hamid Usuri, he isn't here, unfortunately, because he is now at the moment in another ulama program, as I mentioned earlier. And he went through the same categories. Yes, that's why at the end, Sunni ulama, they agreed upon we have to readdress or reinterpret as-sahabatu kulluhum adulun, because they mentioned some of the same verses, some other incidents. For example, Hazrat Sa'd bin Ubadah, he never given his bay'ah to Hazrat Abu Bakr. Hazrat Malik bin Mughira, he clearly revolted along with a great number of Sahaba, and he never accepted, and he was killed by the forces of Hazrat Khalid bin Walid. So all these incidents were mentioned by Sunni ulama, but very carefully. You have to keep it in your mind when we are in the academic study, and we cannot avoid so many verses of the Quran and historical facts. Because generally when we say Sheikh Arif, he is very good, sincere person. Generally, this is the general perception. When he applied for a job and he presented the CV, in the CV, then some critical thing. Yeah, why did you do this? This is there a lot of questions. So the general perception is general person, this person alim, fadil. But in the case of topic discussion, why? Because we killing each other. There is a hatred outside on the same issues. So this is the best opportunity we have to understand each other genuinely, even if we do not agree with one another. So now this is the question time. So first question would be from the stage to set in the example, because sometimes we have to complete the topic according to what we are talking about. Sheikh, Alhamdulillah, thank you very much for your nice presentation here. Sorry. Shia school of thought, there is a general perception among Ahl Sunnah that Shia, they do not believe in Sahaba. It's a general perception. We are not talking about the Prophet Muhammad. And they insult Sahaba according to them, because this narration is generally quoted by many Sunni ulama who are debaters and munazir and things like that. Because according to the Shia, they only believe in the four Sahaba, and the remaining Sahaba, irtaddu, they turned away from the faith after the demise of the Prophet ﷺ. So they do insult. However, you clarified so many points here, and even finally, but we need your proper response, to this general perception.
Sure.
From Ahl Sunnah general perception, and also, you have to address this riwayah as well. Only four Sahaba, Sayyidina Abu Zayd, Sayyidina Salman, Sayyidina Umar, Sayyidina Miqdad, remained on the faith, and the rest of the people turned away.
First of all, we do have some narrations that say ارتد الناس جميعا except the names mentioned by Dr. Khalid. However, these narrations, first of all, they themselves contradict one another, because some mention 4 names, other mention 7 names, other mention 6 names. So there's ta'arud in between them. When there's a ta'arud, we can't accept any of them. This is one. 2, these narrations are mentioned in Al-Ihtijaj by Shaykh Al-Tabrasi, one of our books. Al-Ihtijaj is a book of narrations. It's not a book of opinions. He mentions narrations and ascribes them to Ahl al-Bayt. The problem with Al-Ihtijaj is that it has no asanid. Al-Tabrasi, in his introduction, he says that I took away the asanid so that the book is summarized. When he did that, he took away all legitimacy from these narrations because they have no sanad whatsoever. So, and it's even problematic to say this is khabar al-wahid because it has no sanad as well. Another book, Kitab Sulaim ibn Qais al-Hilali, might mention some of these narrations. Again, this book is very problematic according to Sayyid al-Khoi, Ayatollah al-Khoi. Both of these books are not reliable, and there are several narrations that are mentioned, for example, in debates in Ijtihad and Taqreed. There's narrations that we need in these books. He says these books are not reliable. Neither Al-Ihtijaj nor Kitab Sulaim ibn Qais al-Hilali. This is an opinion by Sayyid al-Khoi. Thus, these narrations, to say the least, they are very weak and unreliable. Very weak and unreliable. Plus, logically, this is not possible. That all of the Sahaba became murtad except 4 of his companions. That means Rasulullah didn't do anything. This is an insult to Rasulullah himself, because that means he didn't do anything. He came to a group of people, and as soon as he died, they went back becoming kuffar. This is an insult to Rasulullah more than it is to the Sahaba. So logically, this is not possible.
Shaykh Arif, you.
Thank you, Sayyid Hussein. Thank you so much for that honest and open presentation of the position of at least some of the Shia in relation to the Sahaba. I have made some observations, and I want to be very open here. When we talk about udul and adalah of Sahaba, I think we need to be clear what we understand by the word adalah. It's a fiqhi construct. When we say adalah, in terms of common human beings, we are talking about people who are sincere, who are genuine, and who are truthful generally. Otherwise, you look at the Islamic revolution in Iran, the people around Imam Khomeini, they are arguing against each other. Sayyid Khamenei, Sheikh Rafsanjani had feuds. They are both known as great people, but they had disagreements amongst each other. Now, people who support Sayyid Khamenei will say Sheikh Rafsanjani wasn't an adil, and vice versa. I think the Shias need to come out of this very restricted appreciation of what Adalah means. Ali ibn Abi Talib Salamullah in Nahjul Balagha praises the Sahaba of Rasulullah, and he condemns his own Sahaba, and he says, Aina Amthal, where are the examples of the Sahaba of Rasulullah amongst you, to his people in Kufa? The Quran criticizes the Prophet himself. Yes? The Quran is so harsh in criticizing the Prophet. Does that mean that the Prophet was bad? What I'm saying is maybe the Shias need to re-look at their whole art of interpretation, hermeneutics, how to understand things. You see, me and my colleagues, I often say to them, what are you doing? This is not the right decision. They often come back to me and they say, you haven't made the right decision here. This action was wrong, was not expected from you. It has to be seen within a human framework. So when the Quran criticizes, the Quran is not condemning necessarily. The Quran is very particular on those contexts. You said about kuntum khayra ummatin, it means all of the ummah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking to the Sahaba in their context. I think this is again very unfair. That we say that when Allah is criticizing Sahaba, it means the Sahaba. But when Allah is praising kuntum khayra ummatin, it means the whole of ummah. We have a yardstick, a standard. Either it's inclusive of all, or exclusive of all and inclusive of only those people who are there. So if we're using one standard that the Sahaba are being criticized here, then use the same standard that the Sahaba are being praised here. And that is the way to understand. Everybody has different levels in their lives. Sometimes they do something wrong, next time they do something good. And Allah is praising them and criticizing them accordingly. Now, the tadahiyat al-Sahaba, the sacrifices the Sahaba have given, the mu'akhat in Medina, the people left everything in Makkah and they migrated. Do you know how grand sacrifice that was? And the people of Medina, when they did mu'akhat, they actually split everything in half. Subhanallah, I don't find such a level of altruism within me, who has been born into the cradle of Islam even now. I just want to make one last observation before, if you can please give us some of your thoughts. That practically, if we say that no, apart from Salman's Abu Dhar, Miqdad, and apart from them, if the others were also good and nice people, then practically the Shia pulpits do not talk about any Sahabi or their noble examples, or take any moral aspects from their qurbanis. They do not take any riwayah from them. In fact, the Shia public don't even know the names of the Sahaba. Even now, when we talk about Khalifa Abu Bakr, Khalifa Umar, we say Abu Bakr, Umar. When we come to Imam Ali, we say Imam Ali. Yes? They were Khalifas. Why do we not call them Khalifa Abu Bakr, Khalifa Umar? Yes? Today, the president of America is who? What do we call him in the news channel? President Donald Trump. This is his title. I'm just saying, no matter where you go, there is a problem within the Shia mindset that has to be clarified. Now, if the Zawja of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has been exonerated in Surah An-Nur, then surely the Shia ulama should be saying this. Bibi Aisha, Lady Aisha, she is the wife of our Prophet, and Allah calls her your mother. So she is my mother now. So I'm saying, no matter how we look at this thing, you cannot avoid that we have a certain problem there. And maybe that problem is because our understanding of the Quran is lacking somehow. And as the Sunnis have fallen into the trap, as in the last meeting we had our great friend, what's his name? I keep on forgetting his name at the right time. Dr. Kharam Bashir. As he said, we are pushed to a corner because of the Shia. We are giving Sahaba utmost veneration because the Shias are criticizing the Sahaba. I think in the same way, because the Sunni are praising the Sahaba, we have been forced into a corner to become very hypercritical of the Sahaba and find every verse to criticize them. And our reading of the Quran is not accurate in that way. These are my thoughts.
أحسنتم شيخنا شيخ عارف. شيخنا, our argument is not purely theoretical, it's practical. The Sahaba today, none of them are alive. They're all dead. When we discuss their Adalah, we're not praying behind them. We're not giving them our daughters. They're not present now to have our discussion is more practical, not just theoretical to say are they good or are they bad. We have narrations from the Sahaba. Here, the practical aspect of this discussion is going to be here. We have narrations from the Sahaba. I don't deny that a great deal of them were good and they deserve respect. But there's a practical argument. Their narrations, are they acceptable or are they not acceptable? Otherwise, I'm not giving them a daughter, or I'm not praying behind them, or that I need to worry about, other things. You see what I'm saying?
You see,
we have narrations from them in Sahih al-Bukhari and 6 of the books of Hadith. I want to see, can I rely on all of the Sahaba or not? Ibn Hajar, Ibn Abdul Bar say that take their narrations without checking their individual. لا طريق إلى جرح أحد منهم. I say no. I say we have to look at each and every single one of their biographies, not just them, our narrators. Our narrators.
Just for my own knowledge, forgive me for interrupting. Our concept in Ahl Sunnah is we don't apply Jarh Ta'deel to the Sahaba.
you do. Practically, in deciphering the Hadith, you have Jarh wa Ta'deel.
No, we don't apply to the Sahaba. We don't apply to the Sahaba at all.
Just after the
Tabi'een. When it comes to the Sahaba, we don't apply it at all.
This is my question.
Yes, let the Sheikh complete. This is the way of putting questions.
So this is one. A great deal of them could be good. I don't deny this. But at the end of the day, I want to see, can I accept their narrations, or they're not here any longer. So their presence doesn't matter to me. But their narrations are present. I want to see, can I rely on them or not? To say that all of them are good, I can't accept. I have to check. Just like I check on the Shia narrators. Just like I check the Sahaba of Imam Sadiq, Imam al-Baqir, the companions. I check their biographies and Al-Marja. I have to check the biographies of Sahaba. This is one. Two, same criteria. I want to see, is he reliable or is he not reliable? This is one. Two, كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس. Ibn Kathir, he says this. He says this verse is speaking about the Ummah as a whole. This is an understanding of his verse. كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس. Also, the verse is speaking as an Ummah, as a whole. If someone were to come in today and says that this group is a good group because they're having the dialogue, does this mean that each individual is a good person? No. As a group, كنتم خير أمة. as a whole, as a group, not specifically the individuals. We have to be accurate in this. Two, mu'akhat bin al-Sahaba, I agree, I accept. Many of them sacrificed. Especially the Ansar. The Ansar, some narrations say that not only did they divide their wealth, those who had 2 wives, he would divorce one of his wives. After the iddah, he would allow his brother from the Muhajir. This is great sacrifice. We do not deny this. No one denies this. This is reality. This is true. Also, I have a question. Who began insulting the Sahaba? Who began insulting the Sahaba? We did not begin insulting the Sahaba. We believe that those who began insulting the Sahaba were some of the Sahaba themselves. Some of the Sahaba themselves would insult other Sahaba. And this is, of course, was wrong. Their actions were wrong. Ali ibn Abi Talib was cursed for 70 years. Who began this? Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. One Sahabi decides to curse another Sahabi for 70 years. This cannot be denied. It wasn't the Shia that began this tradition. It was began Al-Baladuri in Murawwaj al-Dhahab. He talks about the biography of Uthman and Uthman's actions with some of the Sahaba, namely Ammar bin Yasir. He physically abused Ammar bin Yasir, and he hurt him in places which I can't speak of now. This is in Al-Baladuri in Murawwaj al-Dhahab. And the words that he used with Ammar bin Yasir towards his mother, Sumayya, who was the first shaheed in Islam. So who instituted lack of respect for the Sahaba? We see that it was them. Also, there are some Sahaba that deserve respect, but they are not given enough respect. Like Abu Talib. Abu Talib, the father of Ali ibn Talib, was among the Sahaba who believed in Rasulullah and who believed in Islam, but there are some that call him a mushrik, and that he died as a kafir. Is this not disrespect to some of the Sahaba? As for Aisha being exonerated, I absolutely accept that in Ayat al-Ifk, الَّذِينَ جَاءُوا بِالْإِفْكِ عُصْبَةٌ مِنْكُمْ, I accept that the Quran defends the honor of Aisha. And the honor of Rasulullah is a red line. No one can cross that line of the wives of Rasulullah and accuse them of such behavior. Those who do, we Shia, before Sunnis, we will speak against them and condemn them. Yes, maybe they disobeyed in another way, such as the rise of Aisha against Imam Ali alayhi salam. That is another story. But a heinous crime like al-Ifk, we are the first to speak and say that Aisha is doing this crime. This is disrespectful to us and to Rasulullah before anyone else. Anyone who has respect for Rasulullah has to come and defend Aisha from such a heinous crime, because this is disrespecting Rasulullah's honor and dignity.
Sheikh, before you, Sheikh Arif is there.
I just want to clarify my point. I just want to clarify my point. I'm not talking about from the aspect of Jarh wa Ta'dil and the 50 riwayat. According to that, the Shias don't have any Sahih riwayah anyway. Even the Muwathaq riwayat are a handful. If you look at the works of Akhund and Shaykh Ansari, they will say with the strictest methods that the Shia have of Imami and Adil and fala, we don't have any Sahih riwayah apart from a very handful of riwayah. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about general respect. To say this Sahabi fasted like this. This Sahabi went to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, asked this question. This Sahabi had tears in his eyes. For example, the Shias lack that within their teachings. Because growing up as Shias within Shia mosques, there is no mention of the Sahaba. Yes? There is always a negativity about them. I just want to say that, look, I don't want to make this into a 50 discussion.
Sheikh, this is not restricted just to the Sahaba. Even our own Imams, we designate 10 nights for Imam Hossein, while some of the other 12 Imams we barely ever
So I just want to point something out. And of course, if one Mufassir says Ummah means everything else, 20 Mufassir are saying Ummah means those people there. So we can't be picky and choosy and point one out, the one that we like to prove our point. I'm just asking you a genuine question. Do you feel genuinely, lillah, wa li Rasulillah, that the time has come where we have to say that we need to revise the way in which we are looking at the sources? Are we doing this in reaction to the Sunnis, or are we being very sincere in ourselves? Sunnis has to do the same thing. The Shias have to do the same thing. Both sides have to stop defending themselves and try and come towards the truth. That's all I'm asking.
Sheikh, your question.
I mean, Jazakallah khair, Sayyid Qazwini, for your presentation. I think it's extremely important that we have these dialogues, specifically amongst learned people. As earlier on we said, no one has the right of saying who is going to go to heaven and who is going to go to hell. I've seen extremism from both sides of what it leads to. And when we have such a type of dialogue, not within the frame of academia, that how extreme people may interpret a certain view or a certain point he or she may follow. And that unfortunately then leads to a form of extremism where certain, I'm not saying everyone, but some people may then adhere to killing each other, fighting each other, specifically from Pakistan I'm speaking from. And that's one thing I say to my Sunni brothers. I said, don't judge all Shia based upon Pakistani Shias. You know, Iranian Shia are different to Iraqi Shia. And I've experienced that myself when I visited Iraq, the hospitality, the image you have of Shiaism is totally different to what's the reality. So, my point is, isn't it time, and continuing on what the learned Sheikh said, isn't it a time that we move on or beyond this concept of, speaking about the Sahaba or the Ahlul Bayt, try to come to a common understanding where we have tolerance against each other? Because specifically, I know, some of the points you mentioned, respectfully, I wouldn't agree with. And we could debate on that, whether the Ibn Kathir, for example, not everyone within Ahlul, like for myself, Ibn Kathir is an authority for us amongst Ahlul Sunnah. Some Ahlul Sunnah accept him as an authority. So we can spend time of debating and that academia argument, but don't you think, say that it's time now we move forward and we leave this 1400-year-old difference? And let me say one thing and I'll conclude. I was invited to Iraq by the Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Sistani, a remarkable individual who I personally hold in high regards as a leader. And one of the things I said to the Grand Ayatollah Bashir al-Najfi, when I met him in Najaf Sharif, I said to him, Hazrat, don't you think that the greatest Sunni ulama and the greatest Shia scholars, they haven't resolved this issue between the differences between Sunni and Shia? It hasn't been resolved. And I said, Hazrat, you think you and me here today will be able to resolve it? I said, we won't be able to resolve it. So as I accepted that there must be academic debate and criticism, which you are doing, which is fine, I've got nothing against that. But shouldn't we go further than that and look at building bridges of dialogue and looking at things that we agree upon? I was in the Emirates and I was with some Sunni ulama. I'm not saying all of it, but the terminologies they were using towards Shia brothers was very derogatory, like the Jews, for example. So I think from Ahl Sunnah, we have a job of challenging that. But I think also from the Shia scholars, like yourself and your honorable fathers, we have to go beyond this rhetoric, I think, and move a bit further. These are just my observations.
Awesome. Okay. Ahsantum, just share, because you are the first time, alhamdulillah, in this seminar here. This is the very purpose of this seminar and academic dialogue, when it will come to the conclusion. And as a result of this discussion, then you find out the points agreed upon, the differences, how we can work together. And the differences, are they amounting to the Islam and Kufr or just based on ijtihad? So we have achieved a grade from all these topics here. And inshallah they will be bridging the gulf and giving the foundations for the proper religious harmony, mutual understanding. From the stage, another question that I just leave it to the floor. Then Sheikh Sajjad is first, then Dr. Abdul Wahid, the next one. Sheikh, this is my personal experience because I went through more than 1,000 Shia sources from Asma and the history, the proper. Right, I found that the proper history books and Rijal like Sayyid Al-Khoy, Al-Musawi, Hussein Al-Musawi before, people like that, they show the great respect for the majority of Sahaba. There is no insult. However, there is ikhtilaf. Last time it was discussed, there must be, we have to understand, we Ahlul Sunnah, the difference between ikhtilaf and toheen, insult. Insult is something different. When a person doing ikhtilaf, this is not toheen. For example, we also do ikhtilaf. For example, we Hanafis, we follow, in fiqh issues, the mostly Sayyidina Abdullah bin Mas'ud, putting aside the views of Sayyidina Ibn Umar. This is also ikhtilaf, but there is an ikhtilaf is something different. For example, this is very, very important tashri. For instance, according to Jawad Ashiri, one of the very great Shia scholars.
Jawad.
Jawad Ashiri.
From America,
Jawad Ashiri
the brother of the Prophet.
the brother of the
Shari,
Prophet.
yeah. Jawad Shari, yes.
Yes. What's the proper pronounce? Ashiri.
Shari.
Ashiri. Right.
The founder of the Science.
Very, very nice. This book is very nice. The brother of the Prophet. I suggest that both Sunnis as Shia, they have to, read it. So according to these people, for example, there is no question about all Sahaba and Sahabiyat who died or martyred during the life of the Holy Prophet. Respect. Because it was the time of the prophethood of Muhammad, not the Imama of Ali. No question. And there were not only few, not a great number. It means there is a great number of Sahaba, Sahabiyat, properly respected by Shia. This is according to Shia sources. Secondly, coming to those Sahaba who lived far away in Yemen, Bahrain, poor people, laborers, there are thousands and thousands of the people, no question about them. Just living for earning, spreading, doing tabligh, these people, nothing to do what was going on within Medina. Very poor people. No question about it. According to the sources, all of them, they were respected. There are thousands, so maybe more than 20,000, 30,000, 50,000 maybe. These people were respected here. Even Shia people, they don't know. The majority of the, Sahaba, according to their muhaqqiqeen, they, retain respect. Thirdly, the Sahaba who sided, backed Imam Ali, fought under his banner and martyred, obviously they have been respected. Many of them, like Hazrat Adi bin Atam Tai, Hazrat Abu Ayyub Ansari, and many other, Hazrat Ibn Abbas himself as well. And coming to the other category, for example, who sided Khulafa, however, there is a criticism with respect. Criticism with respect. In other words, according to Shia sources, they denote the majority of Sahaba deserving the proper respect. But the question is that in the practical, in majalis, in mawahis of Shia school of thought, we don't see this type of the thing reflecting the majalis. Right. What would you say? It may be rectified or something lacking, or what's your interpretation?
I agree that in general practice, the Sahaba are not greatly mentioned. Not many of the Sahaba, although there are a great deal that are mentioned in the Majalis, they're exonerated. For example, Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari is one of the great Sahaba that was exonerated. Juwaybir, I believe he was African or maybe from Ethiopia, who Rasulullah ordered him to marry one of the women from Al-Ansar, Hudayfah ibn al-Yaman. There are several of the Sahaba that we do mention. Yes, I do admit that we have shortcomings towards a great deal of the Sahaba, just like we have shortcomings towards some of our Imams, as I mentioned. A lot of Shias and a lot of followers of Ahlul Bayt, they say that we have 12 Imams, but we rarely discuss them. We only discuss Imam Hossein alayhi salam, and we give him a lot of emphasis. So it's not just a bias against the Sahaba, we have a bias against some of our own Imams. We only mention it one or twice a year, while Imam Hussein alayhi salam is given more attention. This is more of a practical problem of why don't we do this. I guess, there,
By the
something
way,
should be done about it.
sorry to interrupt you. We already discussed, and you missed that session. Alhamdulillah. From Ahl Sunnah side, exempting, we generally call it, for your information, Sufi school of thought or Brelvi school of thought, or from some other sides, exempted from this school of thought, from Ahl Sunnah. Rest of the people and the groups, they do not mention Ahlul Bayt and their fadail, which have been established by Imam Bukhari, At-Tirmidhi, Muwatta, Abu Dawood, Kutub al-Siha, and the other kutubs not mentioned. One of the Salafi Ahlul Hadith scholar from Pakistan, Shaykh Muhammad Ishaq, passed away. He started to rectify, excluded from his own. So this is another thing here. Not talking about Ahlul Bayt. So from the both sides, I think this is the best time we have to rectify. So rectification, correction is needed from Shaykh Sajjad. Shaykh Muhammad Sajjad, he is Khatib and Imam of AMI Islamic Studies, one of the grandmasters of Islam.
So Quran is adil. When Quran criticizes, it does not exclude anyone else, even the prophets. And I think Quran does not exclude Ahlul Bayt from criticism. Forget this. Hazrat Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu did not insult any prophet. Imam Hassan and Imam Hossein did not insult any prophet, any Sahaba, sorry, any Sahaba, any Sahabiya. Shia people, they follow Hazrat Ali. We follow him as well. If we or all Shia follow Hazrat Ali, then there is no qatl muqatala between Muslims. Sahabas are dead. Insult is still alive. So this is a big problem among humans, among Muslims. Jews insulted Hazrat Isa alayhi salam. They insult Hazrat Isa alayhi salam. They were killed in 1945 at a Holocaust. When humanity realized, Jews and Christians realized, they stopped it. They are friends now. So if we stop this insult,
rectification process started there.
Stop this kind of insult, tabarra, lana. This lana is lana and ummah. We are killing each other. And our enemy, they call us, they gave us names, stupid people, they are fighting each other. So the both extreme sides are very, very wrong. I think both extreme sides are wrong. Come to the middle. And Shia and Sunni, they are all Muslim. They need to correct themselves.
Dr. Wahid from the back.
Samahat to say it, thank you very much for your presentation. But I think for clarifying the Shia position with respect to the Sahaba, we need to clarify some important questions. We need to differentiate between ma'na lughawi and ma'na istilahi for Sahaba. Because the Quran, when it discusses the notion of Sahaba, it mentions it in many places. There is no istilahi use of the concept of Sahaba, because this is something that comes after the Prophet Muhammad. It is an institution that has been created by Muslims. The definitions we give of who a Sahabi is and who isn't a Sahabi. So from the Shia perspective, we need to clarify what is the Shia meaning of Sahaba, istilahi, not lugha, because that's a debate. We need to be very clear. Second of all, I think you hinted at this very important issue, and that is that the notion of Sahaba from the Shia perspective needs to be seen from the light of Markazul Hidayah. Because al-Fard, assume all of the Sahaba were great. The issue of whether they are praised or criticized is subsidiary, it's not important. The issue is, can we take the deen from them? That is the issue, that is the real important question that separates Ahl Sunnah from Ahl Tashayyuh. Right? So the Shia do not accept that we can rely on the qawl of Sahaba as hujjah. Right? So this is something that we need to say clearly without saying that this is multazimun lissab of tawheed. No, there's no mulazimah there. Okay? With regards to the issue of, because this seems to be coming up again and again, of insult and these very unfortunate things, sometimes the Ahlul Khilaf, they think that this is part of our aqidah, that you have to do this. We have to be very clear that this is a cultural phenomenon, which starts really from Safawiyya, from the Safavid period. It is not part of the religious discourse. And we mentioned Imam Ali says in Nahjul Balagha, لا أحب أن تكونن من السبابين. Right? It's got nothing to do with the religion at all. It is a complete separate thing. Now, the fact that it happens, of course, we admit that it happens, it needs to be stopped. And the fuqaha have a responsibility here. They have to come out and make it a religious issue and say it is against the religion that people do this. So these are just a couple of points I think we can...
Thank you very much, Dr. Wahid. This is a very important point, exactly like Sunni ulama last time, after a long process of question answers, and they realized this need to readdress as-Sahaba kulluhum adul because of some problems. Yes, and you know the people who have attended a lot of problems. Then that was decision that we have to reinterpret and relook at this rule. And now, yes, brother, your name?
Yeah, my name is Nuru Mohammed.
May I just introduce him to the group? So this is Sheikh Nuru Mohammed, who is now the Imam of Jummah of the main Shia center in Birmingham. So he's recently moved here, and so it's an honor for us to have him.
Yes, most welcome.
Thank you so much.
Yes, go on.
Let me take Samahat Sayyid for this wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
And also for wonderful questions and comments. My observation and comment will also invite the organizers of this important program that I'm not sure in the last session whether it was done or not, to try to compile a report so that we are able to send it to the Greek scholars for the reviewing of some of the important issues. I think we need to go back to the basics when it comes to the discussion regarding the Sahaba of the Holy Prophets. Among Sunnis and Shias, there are a lot of differences of opinions. Now, if I may give you a few examples. When you look at the whole question of the Adalah to Sahaba, scholars such as Ghazali, Suyuti, Ibn Hajar, Al-Asqalani, they all have different opinions as to what constitutes Adalah to Sahaba. Same way when you come to the ulamas of Ahlul Bayt. When you come to the meaning of Sahaba itself, there are so many opinions among the scholars. If I may give some examples here, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, his definition of Sahaba is more or less like what Imam Bukhari mentioned in his book. For example, if you come to Yahya ibn Uthman ibn Salih Misri, he has also a very different definition of who Sahaba is, which is totally different from what Imam ibn Hanbal mentioned, and of course Bukhari. Abu Ya'la Farra, he also has a different opinion of who is a Sahaba. And you can go on and go on and go on. Same way you have Firqa Kamiliya, who are of the view that Sahaba, all of them are kuffar. So I think we need to go back to the basics as scholars of this beautiful religion to start looking at these terminologies. As Doc mentioned, the whole question of Ma'ana Sahaba, Istilahan. We need to look into those issues. And of course, like what you mentioned, and also Samati Shaykh Arif mentioned, what do you mean by saying God criticized the Holy Prophets? We need to come back to ask ourselves, what is the meaning of the word criticism? And what sort of criticism are we talking about here? And what is the consensus among the Muslim scholars when it comes to the personality of the Holy Prophet? And what is the consequence of saying that the Holy Prophet is criticized by God Almighty in Quran. So we need to look at some of these terminologies and how we put them in public domain. And finally, when you look at Shias, as you rightly mentioned, we focused more on Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And we normally discuss the biographies of Ahlul Bayt. Same way when you go to the Sunnis, they don't speak of all the Sahaba. They speak about Sahaba, no doubt, unlike the Shias. But there are specific Sahaba which they speak more of them. In fact, my personal experience tells me that sometimes we speak more of the Sahaba compared to the way we speak of the Holy Prophet of Islam. So my question is to Samahat Sayyid, what is so important about Sahaba that we need to discuss it and understand it thoroughly? Because Doctor mentioned, whatever we take from them, is it Hujjah or is not Hujjah? If it's not Hujjah, then there is no need for such a discussion. We can just continue to say, let us take Quran, the Holy Prophet, and Sahaba, we respect them. But if they are Hujjah, what is the Shia standing point when it comes to this? And speaking about what practically transpired, do the concept of peaceful coexistence stop us from doing that or not? And where do we fit in some of those verses of glorious? Thank you.
Can I respond? Yeah. Thank you, Shaykhna, Shaykh Nuru. And to Dr. Wahid, Jazakumullah khair al-jazak. This is the point that I was trying to get at with Sabahat al-Shaykh Arif, that the Sahaba are not here today. When we discuss the Sahaba, why are we discussing the Sahaba? Is because we want to see the Sahaba had a certain madhab. They had certain opinions. For example, قول آمين في الصلاة, التكتف في الصلاة, taking away حي على خير العمل in salah, not saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim with a loud voice. This is madhab al-Sahabi. These are a bunch of ijtihadat from the Sahaba. The point is that if we prove adalat al-Sahaba or we don't, it's going to have a direct effect on, depending on madhab al-Sahabi. If I prove that, for example, all of the Sahaba are udul, I have to also prove that they have the right to legislate, that they have al-sulta al-tashri'iyya, they have the right to legislate. Then I will come to see if Umar ibn Khattab legislated a certain law, or Uthman ibn Affan, or others. That is why this discussion is so important. It's not because of historical figures and we want to see, do these historical figures deserve respect or not respect? No, it's beyond that. It's a matter of faith and religion. It's a matter of fiqh. It's a matter of, can we rely on the Sahaba, fi qawl al-Sahabi wa madhab al-Sahabi? Can we rely on their traditions, their ahadith, or not? This is the whole point. It comes back. Shaykh Arif was saying that it's not necessarily a perspective of al-jarh wa ta'deel and fiqh and ilm al-rajal. I say that a big, one of the major purposes of this discussion is al-jarh wa ta'deel and ilm al-rajal. Because at the end of the day, I want to obey Allah Azza wa Jal. I have a fiqh that I want to obey. Dr. Wahid says that, are they masab al-hidayah? Meaning, can we receive guidance from the Sahaba? That's the whole purpose of this discussion. Can I say that I want to discover qawl al-Sahabi hujjah or no hujjah? That's the whole purpose behind the discussion.
Let me comment. Actually, one point needs to be clarified. And when I finished, I request my next brothers or sisters who want to put the question forward, please be brief and concise, because the time is running very rapidly to its end.
Can I give a small reply to some question?
Yes.
As for ihana and sab al-Sahaba or la'n al-Sahaba, again, let me come back to say that not all the Shia are one. Not all the Shia are one. In fact, the Shia themselves are divided on this topic. We have Shia that can testify to this. We have Shia that disagree on the topic of Sahaba. should there be la'an for some of the Sahaba who were proven to be hypocrites or not? This is a matter of controversy between us. We argue between ourselves over this. However, I can tell you from my ijtihad, from my understanding of the verses and from the narrations, that sab is not allowed. Sab is not allowed. We do have a narration, Sahihat, Dawood ibn Shaheen, I believe, or Dawood ibn al-Hassan, I forgot. I gave an entire lecture on the month of Ramadan. The hadith, supposedly, allegedly, that Rasulullah stated, إِذَا ظَهَرَ أَهْلُ الْبِدَعْ مِنْ بَعْدِي فَأَكْثِرُوا مِنْ سَبِّهِمْ وَأَكْثِرُوا الْوَقِيعَةَ فِيهِمْ. I said, hold on a second, let's study this hadith. This hadith is not acceptable, even if it's called Sahih. Well, 1,000 scholars call it Sahih. The Quran says, وَلَا تَسُبُّوا. If a hadith contradicts the Quran, فَضْرُبُوهُ عَرْضَ الْجِدَارِ. We cannot accept this principle. Imam Ali alayhi salam would say, أَكْرَهُ لَكُمْ أَن تَكُونُوا قَوْمًا سَبَّابِينَ. In the Battle of Siffin, he told his companions, Hujr ibn Adi and others, when they were speaking about the camp of Muawiyah, أَكْرَهُ لَكُمْ أَن تَكُونُوا قَوْمًا سَبَّابِينَ. Mention their qualities, but do not curse. This is my understanding of the school of thought of Ahlul Bayt.
If scholars like you, then there is no problem.
Yes,
But scholars
my
in
brothers.
social media.
That's the big problem.
Can I tell you something? Some of those scholars that you're talking about, they will curse me before they curse you. They will curse me before they curse you.
We do understand it. Actually, this is important for this. I'm coming to Shaykh Abu Jaffar. Shaykh Abu Jaffar is waiting restlessly. But please keep it in your mind, because for Ahlul Sunnah, this is not a big problem from your side. That's whether Shia officially taking riwayat from Sahaba or not.
Yeah.
Even if you decide here, there is a respect for Sahaba being as the companions of the Holy Prophet, but on such and such basis, we don't take riwayat from them. We have to stick with Ahlul Bayt, still acceptable to Ahlul Sunnah, not taken as the sign of insult or what. The problem is that when there is when the cursing is coming, then this is the big problem. That's why we are talking here to understand from the proper scholars like you, what's the proper original Shia mazhab is about Sahaba. So this is lesser important whether you are taking narration or not. I do understand they are al-ruwat al-mushtarakun. They are same ruwat from Shias and from Sunnis, including Sahaba as well, But this is not a problem. The problem is only sub and insult, abusive language. This is only the big problem. If this is stopped, then Shaykh Abu Jaffar is very restless. If you can then you are next, Shaykh Abu Jaffar.
Thank you very much, Sayyid, for your presentation. And I normally don't have any question, but I agree with what Sheikh Arif has suggested and what Sheikh Nuru and others have said, that this platform should write a report every time to send it to our Maraja, very important, especially Shia Maraja, because I think we have a big problem here. The Shias, we have allowed the Maddahin and Waz, I don't know what you call them in English. Preachers.
Preachers, propagators,
Maddahin and Waz,
praisers.
we have given them our pulpit, or the pulpit of Rasulullah. So they are speaking to our common people. So to come here and you blame white Shias, they do not remember the Sahabas, while we know the problem, that with one fatwa of Sayyid Sistani or any marja to prohibit those Maddahin not to speak those kind of words, it is enough.
Yes.
So I believe that if we can write the report, special report from this institute, officially in our own names, with signatures, that we want our marja to stop Maddahin, not to curse, and not to say a thing that is against the Shia law of thought. They have to speak good about the Sahabas. It's not going to be stopped. I believe that this should be taken seriously and practically. Otherwise, we'll meet here and meet.
Important comment, quick but very important comment. The Maraja themselves, we're being honest. I want to be honest with you. I don't want to conceal anything from you. The Maraja' themselves, they are divided on this topic. There are some that they would not agree with me, and that they have a negative perspective on a great deal of the Sahaba. And there are others that are completely on the other side, and there are some moderate ones. Today, there are some grand Maraja' that have forbidden some of the Sahaba as a tahreem. They give a fatwa on it. For example, Sayyid al-Khamenei in Iran, they give a tahreem on some of the Sahaba, of the Sahaba and the wives of Rasulullah. And one of our most prominent Maraja', formerly, one of our greatest ulama, by the name of Sayyid Mahdi Bahr al-Ulum. Sayyid Mahdi Bahr al-Ulum was in Najaf, maybe 2 centuries ago, and he's known for his Rajal Bahr al-Ulum. He has a verse of poetry regarding Sayyidah Aisha. He says, Aya Ummah. Shaykh Arif was saying that we should get the Shia to say that Umm and a great deal of our respected scholars, they do. For example, in Iraq, we had a well-known orator who at the time had no competition whatsoever. Dr. Ahmad al-Wa'ili, Shaykh Ahmad al-Wa'ili. I don't know if any of you heard of him. Shaykh Ahmad al-Wa'ili was the top orator of Islam in Iraq. He had utmost respect. Whenever he would mention the wives of Rasulullah, he would say, Ummahat al-Mu'mineen. Sayyid Mahdi Bahr al-Ulum, he has a verse of poetry regarding Aisha. He says, Aya Ummah, Sabbuki muharramu, li'ajli aynin alfu aynin tukramu. This is it's a respect. This is for the sake of Rasulullah, we will honor 1,000 people, not just one person. For the sake of Rasulullah, we have to honor you. Aya Ummah, Sabbuki muharramu, li'ajli aynin alfu aynin tukramu. But our scholars are divided. Not all of them have this perception. I will tell you that our Maraja', they don't have this. All of them have this perception. There are some that agree that Sab and La'an should be stopped, and others have not been convinced yet.
There's the same thing. We must be fair here, and Alhamdulillah, Shaykh is here with us today. In the same way, the other side should have to realize the same. Because there is an insult, we know insult of Ahlul Bayt. Imam Hossein, Imam Ali, Sayyidah Fatima, right? Even back in, I must say, this is my Imam, back in Yazid, this is another form of the insult of Ahlul Bayt. We have to know that this is another big problem within us as well, not only on the other side. Dr. Wahid is before you, Dr. Ayman, and you are after. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then Shaykh Ayaaz, you are.
I think we have to also differentiate one very important point about the practices of the Shia ulama from the earliest times to the modern times. I'm talking about ulama, forget everybody else. There is a big difference between sab and la'an on one side and at-ta'an on the other hand. So if you look at our books, in our books of kalam, we have at-ta'an fi al-wajh. For example, the difference here is sab and la'an is a form of character assassination. It's personal, it's insulting. And this is, of course, not allowed. Question here is that if the Sunni side understand the notion of ta'an being with respect to actions that these individuals performed, then an intelligent person, even Ahlul Khilaf, will say that ta'an should be allowed in the sense that we should be looking at each and individual person and assessing whether what they did was right or what they did was wrong, without sab and without la'an, right? Of course, many of the Sunnah wal Jama'ah will say that when Hazrat Aisha went on the battle of Jamal, akhta'at. She was saying, this is ta'an, right? It's not sab, it's not la'an. So this degree of critical scrutiny is not condemned on both sides. And hopefully this is something we can come to an agreement on.
So this is where they said they have so many good points we will consider. As you mentioned, the matter of Jamal, not only Ahl Sunnah said, Mu'mineen Sayyidah Aisha herself later on she admitted, and this is on the record, undeniable, and she akhta'at. I made a big mistake, and she always cried, weeping. That's on the record. And Hazrat Zubair bin Al-Awam, he left the battlefield, realizing that Ali was on the right side, and especially, experience looking at Sayyidina Umar bin Yasir in his camp, according to the prediction of the Prophet. And also Sayyidina Talha, he left also battlefield on the same ground. All these things have to be addressed by Ahlul Sunnah, because this is the point of reflection. Now, Dr. Ayman. Then Shaykh Azaz.
First, just a small clarification. Thank you for the presentation. The point that you mentioned about, all the verses about Tawbah, Sahaba, and they have made mistakes. No one can deny this. No one can deny this. But the thing is that is Tawbah in itself means that the person committed a mistake that makes them not happy. I think I'll go back to the point that Shaykh Arif mentioned. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam himself said, إني أتوب إلى الله إني أستغفر الله وأتوب إليه 100 مرة. Yeah. So Tawbah here does not necessarily mean that the sin that they're committed will take them out of the world. This is just a clarification. The other point, which and excuse me to say that the level that we are talking at is very low. We are talking about not insulting. This is very low to talk about. And again, because I think that Shaykh Arif, he said got misunderstood, because I'm trying to assert the same thing. We are I don't know about the Pakistani community, back in Pakistan, but for example, when Dr. Khalid said that on the other side, the same thing has to be applied to Ahl Sunnah about Ahlul Bayt. I can never think of a person in the same mind who talks ill of Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib, for example, or Sayyida Fatima Zahra radiallahu anha.
True Sunni, you can say true Sunni.
Yeah. No, but if you talk, you cannot mention a big portion of them. Absolutely not. I mean, absolutely. In my class when I was studying, for example, and it hurts me even to use this as a proof. I'd say the name Mohammed was the most name used, then Ali, and then Al-Hassan and Al-Hussein as names. So it's not because for example, I'm from Egypt. It's not because we are Sunni Muslim. It means I hate to put it as Sahaba versus Ahlul Bayt. It's not, the case is not that at all. So that's why I say the level that we're talking at is very low. Not insulting them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Quran ordered the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, as it came in Tafsir ibn Abbas, and the companion not to insult the idols and the people who worship the idols. فَسُبُّوا الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ فَيَسُبُّوا اللَّهَ عَدْوًا بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam allowed it at the beginning. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam allowed it. So if we are ordered not to insult those who worship a cow or a rat, this is an order from Allah to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when we talk at the level not to insult and curse, are we likening them to the same order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about those who worship someone other than Allah? So the level here is very low. And we are talking about, when I talk about Sayyidina Ali, and this is not, I don't want to say that I respect Ahlul Bayt, because it's like saying, I'm a good Muslim because I pray. No, you cannot be a Muslim without praying. The criteria here is the criterion that we are using is very low. No, I never say Sayyidina al-Hasan. The same way I say Sayyidina Muhammad, Sayyidina al-Hasan, Sayyidina al-Hussein, Sayyida Fatima radiallahu anha. Those who visited Egypt and know about Egypt and other, they would know how much the Ahlul Bayt Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam are respected. So what I'm trying to say is the point that Shaykh Arif mentioned is talking about it. I mean, when I studied poetry, the first I studied was Diman Imam Ali radiallahu anhu. When I talk about children in Islam, the first thing that comes to mind how the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam dealt with Al-Hasan and Al-Hussein radiallahu alayhim. So the literature should be there. If the literature is there, people will know, and this is part of their life. I mean, I don't want to take that much of the time, but again, in one word, talking about the Sahaba from the point that the doctor mentioned, in an academic atmosphere is different from the way we apply it in our life and how the public perceive it. Because the problem that we have right now, the public are more effective in it than the scholars.
Mhm.
So the point in an academic setting, it's a different thing. But if the norm, if the culture, if the literature that's available to the people mentions the Sahaba Ridwanullahi alayhim and the good things that they done, then they would grow up showing respect. You don't have to tell them, be respectful of the Sahaba. You know, because again, it's,
Can you give me a brief?
yeah. So, you know, that's it.
Yeah,
Because there are no more points to be made.
Exactly. أحسنتم شيخنا جزاكم الله خيرا. I definitely agree that talking about insulting and it took us somewhere else. It took us way over. I was hoping that this discussion would have maybe because of my personal background or my personal interest, that it has a juristic twist, a fiqhi twist. Because it's not so much aqa'id. The belief in Sahaba is not so much in aqa'id, because it doesn't affect a person's aqa'id. Aqa'id is believing ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah. You're a Muslim. The results of this debate has to bring us back to you know, a juristic discussion. And
Say just
because at the end of the day, we have to, Afwan, Dr. Wahid, at the end of the day, I want to see who do I take my fiqh from. Let's leave cursing and sub and all that. As you said, it's a lower discussion. I want to see who should I take my fiqh from, because obviously I know there was khilaf between the Sahaba and Ahlul Bayt. I know there was a khilaf between Ali ibn Abi Talib and Umar ibn Khattab. If Umar ibn Khattab or any of the Sahaba, for example, they tell me Salah should be done this way, and Ali ibn Abi Talib tells me Salah should be done in another way, whose opinion should I take? This is the discussion that will influence me as a jurist in fiqh. I want to see, can I rely on, for example, the narration of Abu Hurairah that says, for example, Rasulullah performed his salah this or that way. Can I rely on Abu Hurairah? Or just because he's a Sahabi, I take him for granted? For me, it's not a matter of slap, sab, or la'an, or respect. We're above that. It's a matter of fiqh. Who do I take my faith from, my religion from? Knowing that there was ikhtilaf. No, but we're naive to say that they were all the same. No. That have a Sahaba, that they had certain opinions in fiqh, and the Ahlul Bayt had certain opinions in fiqh. That's why our prayers are different, to some degree. For example, in Maghrib, at the timing of Maghrib, do we cross our hands or we do not cross our hands? These are just examples. Who do we rely on? That's for me, this is the important question. Can I rely on the Sahabi, or do I have to rely on Ahlul Bayt? And if they disagree, whose opinion is more?
Can I ask a follow-up question, Dr. Khalid?
Shaykh Al-Fawzi.
I think maybe he's been misunderstood. So if I could, yeah, I think you clarified it very, very well, sir. Yeah? And I think that's taken on board. And even in the previous session, the majority of the Ahl Sunnah here was saying again, the istilahi discussion of Sahaba is again exclusively fi Bab al-Riwayat. Even we had this discussion last time from our colleagues from Ahl Sunnah. And so you've given us a similar discussion about how this stuff technically, from the perspective of the fuqaha and the ulama, is practical implications is fiqh. The concern which I think is being raised is saying, okay, this is the position of the ulama, very justified and appropriately are dealing with this in this perspective. However, there's a real, arguably even greater practical impact, okay, in terms of how these things are being relayed in public culture. Yeah. And this is what I believe Shaykh Ayman was asking us to think of. Is there some other way to address this? Now, so he's asking us to go beyond your paper. Your paper was very clear, and I also benefited very good from it. Okay? So I understood it. Is there some way to go beyond? Okay, now how do we deal with the cultural issue on the ground, outside of the ulama? Is there something ulama can do to deal with that issue?
Yes. That session is coming, inshallah, how to transfer all these things, what we have achieved by discussing on all, sensitive, controversial issues before and we achieved a lot here from the both sides, should be transferred, disseminated to the public so that the problem would be reduced and the religious harmony and mutual understanding should be very well.
Yes.
Now I will request Shaykh Al-Fawzi, now his turn.
Alhamdulillah wa alamin wa salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. When we are talking about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Sahaba radwanullahi alayhim jami'an, I remember Sayyidina Malik ibn Anas radiallahu anhu ardah, while he was willing to do or to talk about hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he used to make ghusl and wudu, like wudu salat, and put perfume and sitting relaxed and get ready to talk to the people about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And of course, while he's talking about hadith of Rasulullah, he used to talk about Sahaba. So the respect of Sahaba, it's from respect of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Just to clarify something, with there is difference between Asma and Adalah. The other point is regarding to the verse that Sayyid mentioned. إن الذين جاءوا بالإفك عصبة منكم لا تحسبوه خيرا لكم بل هو لا تحسبوه شرا لكم بل هو خير لكم. And the Sahaba that did zina and kadhib and munafiqeen and some other things, we don't want to take part of ayah of hadith or part of ayah and stop by it. We have to take till the end, take all the text. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he talked about al-ifk, and he said in the end, يَعِظُكُمُ اللَّهُ أَن تَعُودُوا لِمِثْلِهِ إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. يَعِظُكُمُ اللَّهُ أَن تَعُودُوا لِمِثْلِهِ أَبَدًا إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. And while we talk about zina, we remember Al-Ghamidiyya radwanullahi alayha wa Ma'if, while they did had on Ghamidiyya, and some of the blood came on the cloth of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu ardah, and he showed like he disliked it, and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, لقد تابت توبة لو قسمت على أهل المدينة لوسعته. والنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول التوبة تجب ما قبلها. والنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال والله إني لأستغفر الله وأتوب إليه في اليوم 70 مرة أو 100 مرة. Regarding to killing, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said وإن طائفتان من المؤمنين اقتتلوا فأصلحوا بينهم فإن بغت إحداهما على الأخرى فقاتلوا التي تبغي حتى تفيء إلى أمر الله فإن فاءت فأصلحوا بينهما بالعدل وأقسطوا إن الله يحب المقسطين إنما المؤمنون إخوة. فهذا لا ينفي لا ينفي معنى الإيمان عن الصحابة رضوان الله عليهم. Regarding to nifaq, ومن أهل المدينة مرضوا على النفاق. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, لا تعلموا, you don't know them. نحن نعلم. So if Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he doesn't know them, so how come we know them or just think who they are? So we have to leave everything as it is and deal with it as the previous mu'mineen and sahaba deal with it. The last point. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to us to call non-Muslims al-Yahud wal-Nasara. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to us in Quran, قُلْ يَا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ تعالوا إلى كلمة سواء بيننا وبينكم ألا نعبد إلا الله ولا نشرك به شيئا ولا يتخذ بعضنا بعضا أربابا من دون الله. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and to Sahaba لا ينهاكم الله عن الذين لم يقاتلوكم في الدين ولم يخرجوكم من دياركم أن تبروهم وتقسطوا إليهم إن الله يحب المقسطين. هذا شأن اليهود والنصارى، فما بالنا نحن المسلمون؟ نعبد ربا واحد ونقرأ كتابا واحد ونؤمن بنبي أو نأخذ من نبي واحد ونتجه تجاه قبلة واحدة، ولا يزال بيننا المسميات والشعارات والرايات، وهذا يتفق فينا قول الله تبارك وتعالى كل حزب بما لديهم فرحون. كل حزب بما لديهم فرحون. أما يكفينا؟ Is it not enough? Muslim word, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in behalf of Ibrahim alayhi salam, هو سماكم المسلمين من قبل. كلمة Muslim is more than enough. There is no Muslim Sunni, there is no Muslim Deobandi, there is no Muslim Bralawi, there is no Muslim Shi'i, there is no Muslim.
Can you make it
just
brief?
This is all what I need to say.
This is a good advice.
Yes, the last point, very, very important to mention, that brother said in last answer to Shaykh Ayman that we are above Sab wa La'n Sahaba. We just want to know from who we should take our fiqh. No, we are not here for this. هذا كلام العوام. We are here to agree about something, to show it for the public, and how we should come together, because we are here and millions of Muslims, they are fighting each other. It's not because of fiqh, it's because of Sahaba and because of Sab and La'n. Open YouTube, millions, all mankind are watching YouTube, watching from Sunni side and Shi'i side, and watch the videos and see how they are swearing each other. It's not because of fiqh, it's because of Sab and La'n and because of respecting for Sahaba and Rasul.
Yes.
الحضارة الإسلامية تقدمت. The Islamic civilization improved, and it was very, very great 100 years ago or 200 years ago, while we were respecting each other and while we were understanding each other. But as soon as we are fighting each other, look to what's happening in Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, it's not because of fiqh, it's because of Sahaba, and because of our enemy give us names.
Yeah.
This is Azhari, and this is Sunni, and this is Deobandi, and this is Shi'i, and this is Bralawi, and this is this, which is.
So this is the time we have to readdress all these points. Now coming to Shaykh Ayaaz, we are waiting for a long time. Please remember, now we are coming to the conclusion, and yes.
So my question is the ayah that he said Muhammad والذين معه شداء على الكفار. In the entire verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is praising the Sahaba, mentioning his specific sifat, which is commonly found in them perhaps. And towards the end, he also makes mention that لِيَغِيظَ بِهِمُ الْكُفَّارِ. Referring again to this mansub to the Sahaba, who shows ghayb in their heart, hatred. They are all kafirin, makes mention. So this will be mentioned in the Quran very clearly. The second question, quickly first one, is that as far as the Ummatul are concerned, are they the part of Ahlul Bayt? Since they married Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they should be also part of the same family, Ahlul Bayt. We should consider all Ummatul as part of Ahlul Bayt, I think, in my opinion. And finally, as far as your fiqh point of view, you've been mentioning that where shall we take our fiqh? So what I want to understand, the Sahaba are the medium. Quran was revealed unto whom? Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but whom it was addressing? Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who are those people that are present? Are the entire Sahaba community? And we take if we don't take fiqh from them, or we don't consider them to be reliable, then they are the witness to the proof and to the So there might be certain Sahaba whom you don't take your fiqh, but majority eventually you take from the Sahabi, because he's the witness there. There was no Tabi'in. Tabi'in means that who came after the Sahaba.
May I respond?
Yes.
As for the first regarding Ayat Muhammad Rasulullah, yes, you're right, but at the same time, the verse is speaking about a specific group, not all the groups. As I mentioned in the presentation, that whoever has these qualities, أشداء على الكفار رحماء بينهم, we accept. 2, Nisa al-Nabi, are they from Ahl al-Bayt or they are not from Ahl al-Bayt? There are some Shia scholars believe that they are not from Ahl al-Bayt. Ahl al-Bayt are specifically Muhammad, Ali, Fatima, Hassan, Hossein. And in the verse, إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. Although the verse is speaking about the wives of the Prophet before or after, with the ضمير كنا يا نساء النبي من ضمير النساء كنا. This verse becomes إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس وليس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. We believe it's not speaking regarding the wives of the Prophet, but rather the 5 that we mentioned. And there are several Sunni scholars that attest to this as well. As for the fiqh, yes, this is an idea that is proposed, that if we do not accept the Adalah of the Sahaba, then how do we accept fiqh? Number 1, we do not cross out all of the Sahaba. We accept some of the Sahaba. We accept Abdullah bin Abbas. We accept Ibn Mas'ud. This is 1. 2, we have Ali ibn Abi Talib. You rely on Ahl al-Bayt. And the fiqh of Rasulullah has been passed on to us by Ahl al-Bayt. So this problem is not a problem for us as long as the Ahl al-Bayt are there. But at the same time, I do not negate that a great deal of our fiqh has come from Habr al-Ummah, Ibn Abbas, Ibn Mas'ud.
So there is a point for just the question. Shah Sahab, Sayyid Rafiq Ahmad Shah Sahab, one of the great leaders of ulama. ٹھیک ہے.
سب سے پہلے تو میں آپ کا شکریہ ادا کرتا ہوں, آپ نے یہ محفل سجائی ہے. یہ کم از کم دوستوں کو یہ علم میں ہونا چاہیے کہ اس قسم کی محفلیں یہ جز وقتی اقدار میں نہیں ہیں. نماز روزے کی طرح کل وقتی قدروں میں شامل ہیں, ہمیشہ ہونی چاہیے. یہ نہیں وقت کا ضرورت ہے, وقت کا تقاضا ہے. اچھا, دوسری بات یہ ہے کہ یہاں پہ 3 چیزیں ہیں. ایک سب و شتم, ایک صحابہ کی عدالت ہے, اور تیسرا یہ ہے کہ کوئی متفقہ لائق عمل درمیان مڈل پہ ہے. انسان کے اقوال افعال اس کے جذبات پہ منتج ہوتے ہیں, اس کے جذبات سے پیدا ہوتے ہیں. جذبات انسان کے علم پہ مبنی ہوتا ہے. یعنی کسی اگر انسان کو آپ برا سمجھتے ہیں, جان لیتے ہیں کہ یہ میرے حق میں یا جس چیز کے ساتھ میں انتہائی جذباتی ہوں اس کے حق میں یہ برا ہے, تو یہ ممکن نہیں کہ آپ اس کے حق میں اچھے جذبات یا اس کی رسپیکٹ کر سکیں. وہ علیحدہ بات ہے کہ حالات کے جبر سے.
1 منٹ سر, یہ اعلان ضروری ہے.
یہ this is a car
blocking the way.
DNO06. Yeah, okay.
حالات کے جبر سے, وقت کے تقاضے کی وجہ سے, کسی مسئلے کی بنا پہ اگر کوشش کی جائے کسی شخصیت یا کسی بات کے بارے میں, تو وہ ایک علیحدہ بات ہے. لیکن یہ حتمی ہے کہ کسی شخصیت کو آپ کے علم میں آ گیا ہے کہ وہ برے ہیں, اور وہ اپنی ذاتی یہ اپنے آپ پہ وہ برے نہیں ہیں. برے اس طرح ہیں کہ جو میرا میسیج ہے, جو جس چیز کا مجھ سے تعلق ہے, یہ اس کے لیے نقصان دہ ہے, میرے گھر کے لیے نقصان دہ ہیں, میری جذباتی وابستگی کے لیے نقصان دہ ہیں, تو اس کے بارے میں عزت والے جذبات نہیں پیدا ہو سکتے. تو اب یہ یعنی سب و شتم سے باز رہنے کے لیے, سب و شتم کو کم کرنے کے لیے کیا ہے کہ ہمیں صحابہ کرام کو ضمیر اور کامن سینس کے ساتھ ہے, یعنی دیوبندی بریلوی کی زنجیروں سے نکل کے شیعہ سنی کی زنجیروں سے نکل کے، زنجیر سونے کی ہو یا لوہے کی ہو یا پیتل تانبے کی ہو، آخر زنجیر باہر زنجیر ہی ہے. یہ ایک مسلمان یا انسان کے ناطے، ایک دانشور اور تجزیہ کار کے ناطے کامن سینس کو حالات کو سامنے رکھتے ہوئے ریوزٹ کرنا چاہیے اور ان کا مطالعہ کرنا چاہیے. جیسی دنیا کی باقی تاریخیں ہیں کہ ان تاریخوں میں جو ہر اول دستہ کے طور پہ جو لوگ شامل ہوتے ہیں یا اس تاریخ کا ساتھ دیتے ہیں اسے کامیاب کرنے کے لیے ان کی کیا، تو پھر اس کے بعد ان کے بارے میں وہی خیالات پیدا ہو جاتے ہیں. جب خیالات اگر کسی انسان کی فضیلت آ جائے گی تو ادب کرنے پہ ہم خود بہت مجبور ہو جائیں گے، لیکن اگر فضیلت اب ذہن میں نہیں بیٹھے گی تو اب ادب ہم نہیں کر سکتے. اب رہ گئی جرا اور تعدیل کی بات، تو صحابہ کرام کی حیثیت جو ہے صرف یقونا نہیں ہے. یہ ایک صحابہ کرام کی روایات ایسی ہیں اس قسم کے، یہ لمبی تفصیل ہے لیکن وقت نہیں ہے. ایک اس قسم کے جن میں دین کی روایات ہیں، یعنی نماز ہے، روزہ ہے، اس قسم کی ایمانیات ہیں وغیرہ وغیرہ. ایک صحابہ اور وہ نبی پاک صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم کی نسبت سے ہیں کہ آپ علیہ السلام نے یہ فرمایا یہ فرمایا. ایک یہ ہے کہ اور پھر آپ علیہ السلام کی دور کی ہیں، اور اسی قسم کی روایات آپ علیہ السلام سے بعد کی دور کی ہیں. میرا خیال ہے کہ ان میں جرا اور تعدیل کی کوئی ضرورت نہیں ہے. ہو سکتا ہے پہلے میں یہ کلیئر کر دوں کہ میں ممکن ہوں، میرے پاس حوالہ نہیں ہے، یہ سب میری اپنی ذہنی اختراع ہے، اسی لیے کہ ہم درمیانی پوائنٹ کسی جگہ پہ اکٹھے ہو جائیں اور اعلی تشہیروں کے لیے بھی گنجائش پیدا ہو جائے اور ہم بھی تھوڑا سا ان کے سامنے.
ہاں بہت اچھی مکمل ہو گئی آپ کی بات.
اور دوسری بات یہ ہے کہ دوسری قسم کی روایات یہ ہیں کہ صحابہ کرام کی آپس کے جو تعلقات ہیں ان تعلقات کی روایات ہیں، اور وہ تعلقات بھی ایسے ہیں کہ یعنی بعض دفعہ مشاجرات والے تعلقات کو بیان کیا جاتا ہے، بعض دفعہ محبت والے تعلقات کو بیان کیا جاتا ہے، اور پھر اس میں صحابہ کی آگے کیٹیگری. تو میرا خیال ہے کہ یہ اعلی تشریحوں کے لیے کچھ گنجائش نکل سکتی ہے.
اس میں just let me give a response because this is related to the general advice. Good suggestion. یہ آپ نے بہت اچھا، اور آج کی اس گفتگو کے اندر یہ نقطہ بہت اہم سامنے آیا ہے، جیسے کہ شیخ عارف نے بھی اور شیخ قزوینی نے بھی اس بات کو تسلیم کیا ہے کہ صحابہ کے اس مسئلے کو دوبارہ نظر ثانی کی جائے گی اس کے اوپر. اور چونکہ زیادہ کنسرن اس بات کا ہے کہ چونکہ ہم بھی صحابہ کے اندر، جیسا کہ میں نے اس سے پہلے عرض کیا کہ کہیں سیدنا عبداللہ بن مسعود کے قول کو لیتے ہیں، دوسرے کو ترک کرتے ہیں، کہیں حضرت ابن عباس کے قول کو لیتے ہیں، حضرت معاذ بن جبل کو ترک کر دیتے ہیں. یہ اخذ اور ترک ہمارے ہاں بھی ہے. اور پھر اہل تشیع کے اندر میری خود نظر سے گزرا کہ بہت سے صحابہ جن کے راوی روایات لی ہیں، اس چیز کو مشکل ہی ہوتی ہے، انہوں نے اس مشکل پر بحث کی ہے کہ اس کو پبلک میں بیان نہیں کیا جاتا. ہماری طرف سے بھی یہ بات ہوتی ہے کہ ہم بھی اہل بیت کے فضائل پر جو حدیث ہے، مثلا غدیر کی حدیث ہے، حدیث الثقلین ہے، وہ تو صوفیہ حضرات بیان کرتے ہیں، تو آپ لوگ تو بڑے سیف ہیں، جب ہم بیان کرتے ہیں تو شیعہ ہو جاتے ہیں. یہ تو اس لیے جب آپ لوگ بیان کرتے ہیں کہ ہم جو ہے نا اصل ریئل سنی ہیں، تو اس میں کچھ وزن نظر آتا ہے. اس لیے کہ اہل سنت کا جو 1200 سال پہلے یعنی یہ باقاعدہ جماعت کا آغاز ہوا تھا، باقاعدہ تھی تو پہلے، تو اس کے اندر یہ تھا کہ اہل بیت اور صحابہ دونوں سے محبت یہ تھی. تو بہرحال یہ شیخ was talking about just a middle way, because we are talking here about Sahaba. There is one side insult and sub, one side jara and ta'deel, and one side is respect, and we have to find out the middle way so that we can get together on the solid basis. Because there are some academic discussion when we're talking about whether we take the riwayat from Sahaba or not. This is related to the higher, scholars, juristics, verdicts, and the fiqh. This type of the thing have nothing to do with the common people on the grassroots. On the grassroots level, it's related to the respect and their maqam, including Ahlul Bayt as well. Because the people who don't mention, they have to take another point from the other way. There is obviously jara and ta'deel, and about Sahaba. We also mentioned, their mutual relationship basis on the love and mushajarat as well. They have their disputes. All of these things we have to control. That's why he said there is a room for the Shias as well with their mushajarat. When they're talking about and we take it on the other side, not positively, but they should be ready But from that side, it should be a proper form of talking about Sahaba, re-look, readdress, or this problem. This is a good suggestion, and already we have discussed here. Hafeez Idrees Saab, he was asking question.
Actually, those questions they were addressed already here. But one thing, I want to share my own feelings regarding to the Sunni school of thought and regarding to the Shia school of thought as well. And the impression given here that there is a low respect from the Sunni community regarding to the Ahl Bayt. I think this impression is not good because in every khutbah, all our ulama, when they say khutbah in Arabic, they mention the names of all Ahl Bayt, Sahaba as well, like Imam Hassan, Hossein, Fatima, and others as well. So the other thing is we have Islamic centers, mosques, and their names are to Masjid al-Ali or mosque as well. So the other thing is about the Shia community as in the Sunni circles. I'm talking about the common people in the mosque, on the streets. The Shia, they think that they are not in the mainstream ummah, the part of the mainstream ummah. So this is a very serious type of feelings of the common people. If you go in the streets, in the shops, and ask about the Shia, they will say, no, I don't want to talk about the Shia. They have the feelings, that is the feelings about the Shia. So what I'm suggesting here is that when the Shia scholars, or most of the scholars that are sitting here, when they have their majalis in their mosque or Islamic centers, I think they teach their followers about the other Sahabas as well. We are talking here that we have these beliefs and we don't like cursing, we don't like sabushikam, we don't like those things. This is concise. Yeah, because the people they speak about 10 or 15, I'm just giving it. So what I'm asking is we should do some practical type of things. When you speak to your followers, you should mention the names of Azwaj Mutahirat as well. You should mention the name of Khulafai Thalatha and other companions as well. You can criticize their actions as well, but give some respect as well. So the people they should realize that the Shia community they are the part of the Muslim Ummah as well.
Can I mention one thing? The sense that I'm getting is that there's a minority of the Shia that are very outspoken on YouTube and on the media that give an impression that this is all of the Shia, that these are the Shia. And I think that's the problem. There are some from the Shia that are very outspoken in cursing the Sahaba and Sab and Shaitan, who represent themselves only, and that group has a problem with all the other groups of Shia. They disagree with others, and they accuse others of destroying Islam and ruining Islam. They're very outspoken online, on YouTube. They give an impression that these are the Shia. I'd like for the brothers to understand this, that they only represent themselves. They don't represent others. Yes, they're very active online. They give the impression that all the Shia are like that. But that's not the case. Yes, we do have a problem that the moderate Shia that do not believe in said, they're quiet. They're quiet, not home. They remain reserved to themselves. That is a problem. We do have a problem of them not speaking out as well. So I want the brothers to understand that the Shia are not all the same. If you see some that perform Sad and La'an, they represent themselves. They don't represent all of the Shia. Shia are 500 million, approximately 300, 400, 500 million. I don't know exactly how many. These people don't represent all of the Shia.
So, actually, the food is ready there and time is already taking. I think there are the people who are waiting, but I'm sure you cannot concise yourself because this is the critical time. If you have to ask a question. Okay, just briefly, Shaykh, can you say
I would like to say only 2 points. First is this, that if you go through our main references, basic references of Shia, you will not find this thing in there. Kutub Arba, you will not find this thing in there. So this is not related with our religion. This is related with the reaction of the Sunni people, the Sunni scholars, who blame Shias as Jew and as kuffar. And it is not being done but from the scholars. No scholar has agreed with this, and we are fighting. We are fighting in Pakistan, in India, in Iran. We are fighting against this. But the main thing is that you also, our respected Sunni scholars, has also a duty to convey the message to their scholars. Not the scholars have not to say kafir. If general public say we don't, we have no any problem with general public. But the scholars will say that this is Shia kafir. It became a big problem. That is the thing I want to.
It's very, very excellent. Brother Nasab,
what I understand.
Brother Nasab is the secretary of the Central Mosque of Birmingham City.
Thank you very much. What I understand from the faith and Iman, and the purpose of it, I suppose, is to win the prayer of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be successful in hereafter. And I think the Sahaba must have got the same concept in their mind about Iman too. They wouldn't have conduct themselves, but later in the history, they will be discussed the way we are discussing them today. And similarly, at the same time, I don't think our grading or degrading to them matters any to them at all. Whatever they are placed with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His mercy stays there. They don't have a slightest, our discussion, our gradation and degrading or degrading on the other hand, wouldn't affect the slightest to their real position with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the other thing is we don't have all comprising knowledge that we can claim that such so-and-so Sahaba was upper and the other was lower. Allah knows it and He will reward them. We are not going to reward them. The one thing which I have an issue with is the Munafiqeen. I don't think it is right to grade them or take them among the Sahaba at all. Because for being a Sahaba or Sahabiya, Iman is, the existence of Iman is crucial. It has to be there. Otherwise, many kuffar must have been in company of Prophet, peace be upon him, sometime. But they are not taken as Sahabi. And the other point which I want to comment is Quran criticizing the Sahaba. I don't think it is right for us to take it, apply it to those very people. I think it is for us. It is to learn lesson out of it and improve our faith in Iman and practice, but not to. Allah has a right in His person to criticize them, or curse them, and then yet forgive them as well. But I don't think we have any right to grade them in the light of Quran. The Quran said such and such thing about so and so person, so he or she is condemned now. with the government, no, Allah may have pardoned them. As Quran is witness that the Bani Israel had committed crime after crime after crime, and yet Allah has been pardoning them. So these are few of the comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think the program has come to its end. And now this is the time of achievement. And then food is ready, waiting for you, inshallah. The points agreed upon as a result of this discussion, and if I take into the consideration of some of the discussion regarding the previous session, as mentioned, Sahaba were human beings, not superhumans, and in the light of the Quranic verses and Hadith. And the same was addressed last time by Sunni ulama agreed upon, not superhumans, not infallibles, except infallibles according to Ahlul Sunnah, there were Anbiya. According to Shia, already discussed, apart from Anbiya, the Imams as well. And the Isma has already discussed, so no need to repeat it. So this is the point agreed upon. Second point, not all Sahaba were adul. Many Sahaba were exempted from, according to the ahadith and the verses. Same was agreed upon when was presented last time by Sunni scholars, except, there was a need to be readdressed as Sahaba kulluhum adulun. These principles established by Muhaddisun and Mufassirun in this way, and to reinterpret it according to the verses of the Quran, authentic ahadith, well-established historical facts. So it should be redefined. That was, read. And Dr. Ayman was here next time. Dr. Ayman, inshallah, going to is the brief paper is going to present. Not at the part of the big session. That will be a subsidiary. Just wudaha, brief wudaha, inshallah. Because this is incomplete, as we discussed. And another point, not all Sahaba were equal in ranking. There was a darajat classification. Yes, obviously, that was already mentioned. There was darajat according to Al-Sunnah as well, based on their iman, their sohbah, muddat of sohbah, hijrah, khidmah, jihad, etc., obviously, agreed upon, right, these points. Another point, this is the principally narrations, they may be accepted from them as, there is no denial from Ahlul Shia, principally, they cannot accept riwayat from them. Virtually, they did it, and apart from Umar, Abu Dhar, some other Sahaba as well. And obviously from the other point, and they accepted from the most of Sahaba from Ahlul Sunnah, accepted the riwayat, right. Then, ikhtilaf is allowed with Sahaba, not to him, not person that deserve respect. Ikhtilaf based on ihtiram and your respect, agreed upon from Ahlul Sunnah. The differences, this is on the principle as-sahabatu kulluhum adul, according to the one side, Ahlul Shia, so not all of them, as you have listened. From Ahlul Sunnah, this is not completed so far, this principle. But to some extent, we may find, the majority or the overwhelming majority of Sahaba, they were all right from Ahlul Sunnah. Exempting, as mentioned by Imam. By the way, there is a clarification from Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Munafiqun, they are exempted from the rank of Sahaba. They are not Sahaba. However, literally, Nabi alayhi ashabuna, he said, regarding Abdullah bin Ubay and this group, literally, but truly, in real sense, they were exempted. Another clarification, as you have mentioned, Shaykh, about Ayaaz, Muhammad Rasul, Qad khalat min أفإن مات القلت أو وإزارة أو تجارة أو لا وللفضل إليها, or regarding حتى إذا فشلتم وتنازعتم في الأمر, and so on. But it never remained for over at the part of their life. That was impacted. That was in the same context. وَلَقَدْ عَفَى اللَّهُ عَنْهُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ حَلِيمٌ. So, according to Ahl Sunnah perspective, that was an error made at a certain time, but immediately that was rectified. Never remained as a part of their character and their life. So it should be taken into consideration. Any other point which I missed from the agreed upon or the differences, if you can help me? Yes.
I think this point raised by somebody that we can write to Ayatollah Sistani or some other Maharaji for this respect with our signature. I think it has to be included. It will pay good attention and it will be nice, I think.
All right.
And also, I will like to recommend that you people also advise your ulama not to say kafir to the Muslims. Islam came to say everybody is Muslim and we are going to.
This one is from the both sides.
No, we are not saying that you are kafir.
When the people that are
okay.
come to the
came before, came after.
If I can mention one thing, the brother that mentioned something about Sayyid Sistani. 2-3 years ago, in the city of Al-Mahdi in Baghdad, a group of young men, maybe not more than 17 or 20 young men, they came out in the streets of Al-Mahdi, which is by the grave of Abu Hanifa, and I believe they were cursing Umar. They were insulting Umar. Sayyid Sistani usually does not, he doesn't get involved in minor things. He doesn't get involved in politics, let alone the next day he issued a statement. Sayyid Sistani that does not get involved in these things and does not get involved in political events and doesn't give his opinion, but for this, even though there were only 17 or 20 young men that were cursing or insulting Umar, the second day he issued a statement that these people, they do not represent us. Our office completely condemns these actions and warns such groups of basically excommunication or lack of blessing, something like this. Very harsh tone towards people. So Sayyid Sistani takes these things very seriously to his defense.
Say the fact it's just one sentence. I think there's a need, specifically from Ahl Sunnah, that because we live within our own communities, we don't interact with our Shia brothers. It's just visiting them, sitting with them, talking to the scholars. And when I visited Iraq and I sat down with Bashir Najafi, Sayyid Muhammad Hakim, your father, what I thought was Shiaism was totally different to what the reality is. So I would definitely recommend our Sunni brothers to visit Iraq, and you'll see that coexistence.
This is something which is lacking. Okay, Jazakumullahu khairan for your musahada, your time, your contribution, your sacrifices. May Allah give us all great jaza. Now we have to conclude our program with the dua of the Holy Prophet.
जिस तरह शेख ने आयात में जिक्र किया है ना, उनमें अगर फिसक और इस्यान की बजाय, इसलिए कि निफाक जो है वो एक नजरियाती इस्तिमरारी अमल है, फिसक जो है और इस्यान जो है ये मफाजाती अमल है, लेकिन उसमें बगावत की नीयत शामिल होती है, और जो मफाजातन सेकेंडरी अगर हो जाए तो उसको खता कह सकते हैं। तो वो खता जो है वो अपनी मिसअंडरस्टैंडिंग से भी हो सकती है, इंसान ये समझ रहा है दूसरा हो जाए, और जैसे कि बाजार आओ तिजारत हो गया बस कहते हैं जी हाँ, तो वो अगर साहबा के लिए वो लफ्ज़ इस्तेमाल किया जाए खता का,
अगर फिस्क का भी आया है ना वलीद बिन उक़बा के हवाले में जहाँ पर फासिक़ुन बिनबाइन, so Shaykh Shah Sahab is just thank you Shaykh. Just this is a clarification because as it has been already explained, some of the Sahaba they made mistake or error or sin and later on they repented, right? Even including adultery, for example. The real term should be used here, error or something like that, instead of the fisq. The fisq never remained. And then I reminded, fisq is there, used by the Quran. Yes, can never be changed because that's the Quran. And the rabbinic verses where fisq is not mentioned, their sin is mentioned or khata is mentioned, something like that. So it should be, the new term should be attributed to them instead of fisq. So this is just a suggestion.
Yeah, no, Doc, sorry, before you conclude, I think very good discussion, but one thing we need to agree, all of us, is that me being a Shia and you being a Sunni doesn't mean that we cannot come together. And the verse which was quoted earlier on, قُلْ يَا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ سَوَاءٍ بَيْنَنَا, meaning there are differences, but there are common grounds.
Yeah.
We can always come on common grounds and continue with whatever we do. At the end of the day, Doc, whether we like it or not, the reality is that Shia will practice the way he practices, and Sunnis will practice the way they practice.
Yeah.
And the faith for all is there. What is important is, as scholars, this whole point or the importance of common existence and unity. This is how I take it. As they mentioned, we have what is called Wahdatul Diniya and Wahdatul Ijtima'i. Let's look at this Wahdatul Ijtima'i. Wahdatul Ijtima'i, in my personal understanding, simply means I'm not obliged to change what I do because of you, and you're not obliged. But we can go together peacefully. When you come to my mosque, I do not expect you to pray the way I pray. Neither when I come to a mosque, I do not expect you to pray, as I do. But we can still agree together under Ummat and Wasata, and we can continue to do. So what I am suggesting is, from our part as Shia, there are a lot of work that we need to do to also change the mindset of our people and our followers. Likewise, also when it comes to the Sunni cycle also, there are a lot of works. If we have to bother much in changing some of these fundamental issues, it may take us 100 years and we'll not be able to do. But there are simple issues like the question of la'na, the question of sabr, which if I do la'na, I don't do la'na. It doesn't take any faith from me, it doesn't add any reward to what I do. So we can do that as Shia, which I personally as a Shia feel we have it as a problem and we need to address it as soon as possible. The same way when you come to the Sunni cycle, the whole question of thinking that Shias are kuffar, to that point that when I as a Shia come to your mosque, I'm scared, I'm hiding, I don't know. I think this discussion is really phenomenal. I love it. That with this we can take forward to say, look, Shia should feel comfortable in this day and age when he visits a Sunni mosque and everyone. And a Sunni should also feel comfortable and we need to be open and we have to respect each other's opinion. It has to be in a humble way, in a humble manner, in a calm way, in a calm manner. With that, I think we can build the better world for our future generation.
جزاكم الله خيرا سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نستغفرك لا اله الا الله نستغفرك ونتوب اليك سبحان ربك رب العزه عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.